You know, when you hear iPhone, most of the time you think about the crazy good cameras, the most advanced garden all on the planet, the triangle and stuff, but not all the time you get to hear the word budget with iPhone. Well, depends on how your wallet defines $600, but the TLDR is the new iPhones are here, and let's say they are interesting. You might also have heard, but China is allegedly the new AI GOAT. Allegedly. Plus, TikTok actually got banned. It's complicated, and the Galaxy S25s are here. So this means for the past weeks or so, I have been keeping notes. And let's say here's a recap of the tech that I missed while I was gone under the radar. Let's get started. So let's start with my most favorite story of the day, DeepSeek. And up to this point, I'm sure most of you are aware of what it is, but just to make sure we're on the same page, let's use an analogy. So at some point in time, we took rocks out of the earth. Specifically, we took silicon plus a bunch of other rocks and we made fancy rocks, like rocks that can think when you put electricity. And then we scaled these rocks in the magnitude of acres. We call these data centers. And turns out, if you give these rocks tons and tons of data, they're able to sort out, filter, analyze and recognize patterns so well to a point that they basically can cure cancer and also produce ultra-realistic cat videos. But this entire feeding process costs money, energy, and tons of resources, which is why the big dogs who could do this data feeding for the wrong time were companies like OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google. And they put some version of the rock under a paywall to generate profits. Seems like a fair business equation, right? Well, yes, but when the whole world least expected, China's DeepSeek was unveiled, and it was just him saying to the big dogs that, hey, we figured out how to feed our rocks, and now they grow, think, and solve problems faster and better than yours. And the best part, here's a homework which anyone can copy, and big dogs were like, whoa, what just happened? But let's not forget, this is China we're talking about here, which means global politics happened, some countries essentially banning this service, while other government officials essentially restricted from having access to the service. No, mostly because of data and stuff. I'm no international relations person, but what I can give you is a technical walkthrough of why DeepSeek might have just been the best that AI has been for a while now. So let's say you're a teacher teaching some kids how to do math, let's say multiplication, and in your method of approach, you ask them to give you a step-by-step breakdown on how they reach the answer. So in prompt engineering, a similar method can be used in training models, and we call it chain of thought. So in chain of thought, we have the AI model, which we call the agent, and we have the answer, which we call the reward. And the different strategies that the agent uses to get the reward are what we call policies. So when you give it the question, like the multiplication, it studies the environment, and the environment basically means how this problem is being done, different methods of doing it, and it picks the best policies from the environment to give us the best reward in the least amount of time. And while it does that, it gives us a step-by-step process on how it reached to the answer, which means that if there's any problem or if there's anywhere in the code that the prompt or that the AI can get it wrong, we can pinpoint exactly where it occurred, and we can modify our prompt engineers to give it a better prompt so that it may not make the same exact mistake next time. Seems complicated, but this is essentially what you see when you ask like DeepSeek, hey, how's the day? It thinks and thinks and thinks, and in that entire process, it gives you what it's thinking, and at the end of the day, it gives you the output. Well, this method is really simple, and it is mostly used by many companies in prompt engineering, especially in training these AI models. So yeah, that is chain of thought. And if you thought this process is mind-blowing, then let me tell you about the next process, which is reinforcement learning. So back to our kindergartens, when you're teaching math, you might give them the problem with the solution and the answer simultaneously, but you're not really sure if they've learned anything, so you give them then a test to make sure that they actually have learned something from the teachings. So in AI engineering, a similar process is used where the first approach is called supervised learning, and the second is called reinforcement learning. And for a long time, the first method was used because reinforcement learning produced an AI model that couldn't reason as compared to the first supervised model. But what DeepSeek did is what is phenomenal. It managed to produce a model that can outperform the one that was trained on the first approach. So it's used reinforcement learning, but the way they implemented it, it was in a way that it outperformed OpenAI's best thinking or reasoning model, the O1. And the best part, they managed to make this process over 671 billion parameters. And they used the bigger model they trained on, which they call the V3, to train other smaller models, which they called the Quen and the Llama models, which were trained basically from the previous two processes, the chain of thought and the reinforcement learning. But the training was not done by people, it was done by the machines to other AI models. You get the point? So at the end of the day, they managed to build something that, yeah, it is of industry standard, but at a fraction of the cost and the price, and it runs on lower power compared to the OpenAIs. Plus, they managed to put it open source so that anyone can learn from what they've learned, and you get the point. I mean, there's a research paper they brought out, which I'll leave a link down the description, and you can go check it out yourself, how they managed to make this engineering into the DeepSeek model. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's through competition like this where we, the users, actually benefit, because we have variety now instead of the default options that we have gotten used to. I mean, there's some videos that are explaining how to run these models locally, which, hell, it's an advantage to us, the users. And DeepSeek Stories tells us that we can do pretty much everything, even though we have limited resources, but just put our mind onto it. Now, on to a more interesting topic. I don't know if that's interesting, but come on, phones, love them or hate them, are perhaps the most popular pieces of tech that the everyday person knows about. I mean, even if you're a nerd, the easiest way of starting a conversation with someone is to just bring phones on the table. You can't lose. And if you've been following the smartphone games from late 2024 last year, you pretty much were highly anticipating huge improvements of the smartphones that will come out in this year. Let me explain. I mean, smartphones like the Vivo, Xiaomi, and Red Magics of the world were coming with nearly 6,000 milliamperes of juice while still maintaining the overall shape. Turns out it was silicon carbide, this new tech. Well, not exactly new, but it uses the traditional lithium-ion battery, but instead of the traditional graphite anode, it replaces it with a newer silicon carbon composite, which meant that we could get more energy-dense batteries in the overall nearly identical form factor. Well, this meant that we could get phones that were slimmer and slimmer and slimmer, but were not sacrificing battery life. And if you've been looking all around recently, you've seen smartphones getting on a diet, whether it's the Oppo Find N5, or it's the Galaxy S25 Edge, or it's the rumored iPhone 17 Air. Turns out they can get as slim as they can get because of the silicon carbon. And secondly, it's the Snapdragon 8 Elite, which for the first time in a really long time, it boasted an increase of nearly doubled or tripled the performance in relation to the predecessor. This meant that this chipset was now more energy efficient, and it was now performing better than the previous predecessor. Plus, it handled tasks like the AI assistive tasks more better than the previous due to the NPUs and stuff. And so this meant that smartphones that were released early in the year, like the OnePlus 13, which had the battery and the Snapdragon combo, were, I kid you not, impossible to kill in a single day of normal use. So we were all anticipating great things when we heard the Galaxy S25 Ultra were to be unveiled. What just happened? Now, to be real with you, I was expecting more from Samsung this year, like design changes. But to be real with you, Samsung tried so little to try no changes in the Galaxy S25 Ultra. I mean, I get it, like consistency, design, but for the last years, Samsung were defined by the things that they tried new. And to me, that was the peak Samsung. Like, come on, Samsung, you should update your design. Do you know that ITEL, Transsion Holding Company, is using your design? Just putting it out there. So be sure to update it once in a while. Now, let's go back to the garden wall, because the Apple community is out here calling $600 budget. Oh, okay, hold your horses. Let's explain how we got here in the first place. So the idea behind the iPhone SE is basically that it is a budget Frankenstein iPhone, which means that it is a phone that takes components from different generations of the iPhone to essentially bring out a cheap iPhone, which still is true for the iPhone 16e, but budget, Okay, now The 16E basically takes the body from the iPhone 14s plus the screens and some of the internals, but the driving forces of this iPhone is the new latest A18 chip from the latest iPhones, though it's missing a core from the iPhone 16s. But also it's got a new Apple Silicon, the C1 modem for 5G and internet and stuff. Plus it runs iOS 18 with Apple Intelligence, and also got some missing parts like no MagSafe, no camera control button, but you get the point. Now, comparing it with the last SE, this is more pricey, nearly $200. But if we use Apple math, this is the best SE, and using Apple graphs, we shouldn't be comparing it with anything modern, according to Apple math. But since we're not Apple, let us use rational intelligence to explain the iPhone 16e. First, this is not a budget iPhone. It's $600, which is in a category of mid-range phones, which means it's going up against the latest from Samsung and the Pixels of the world. Plus, if we bring up the flagship mid-range debate, it's going up against the best flagships from last year, because now I think the 15 Pro is going at around the same price. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is going for around $500 max there. So when you look at it that way, then this iPhone makes little sense. Like, let's say you want an iPhone with wireless charging, with MagSafe, and also you want it to have Apple Intelligence and an action button. Then for $600, you can get the 15 Pro. Or let's say you want an iPhone with a notch, but still have a Pro motion display plus wireless charging. Then for around $500, you can get the 14 Pro, which both the two smartphones are better in nearly everything compared to the 16e. I mean, I still can see a non-zero segment of people get the 16e using Apple math, and believe me, there are a lot. But if you use our rational intelligence, then what do you get? USB-C, longer battery life, a fewer variety as it only comes in black and white, or the new Apple Silicon. Like, come on guys, am I even trying? Looking at it that way, this phone only exists to make people walk up the price ladder. Like, come on, it comes in a base of 128 gigabytes. Plus, when you want to upgrade it to 512 gigabytes, which believe me, should be the bare minimum for any smartphone, help me spread the word, then you've reached at $900. But you can get the iPhone 16 for $900. But it also comes at 128 gigs, so bump it up to 512 gigs, and you're sitting on the 16 Pro category. But where did you start all your price ladder from? The iPhone 16e. So you looking at it that way, then you see, yeah, there was a need for Apple bringing an SE to the family to sort of make people walk up the price ladder. But if you look at it in a rational way, I think this phone shouldn't exist in the first place. Hear me out, it shouldn't. Yeah, but so you have it. Those were my most controversial stories of all time that happened while I was gone, saving the semester and stuff. But those were not the only things that happened. Like, we had the TikTok ban, we had a new video generative AI model that made Albert Einstein talk again.
What would art be like without emotions? It would be empty.
And then Apple teamed up with Alibaba for their AI influence in China, and we got the Oppo Find N5, which now holds the title of the thinnest foldable in the world, just below the Huawei Mate XT. And then I got a cat, her name's Hope. Plus, we have a Studio Update 2.0 video coming on the way, which I'm going to showcase some new lenses we have in the studio. So yeah, be sure to check out that when it drops. But if you want to know what exactly happened to the red iPhones, then be sure to watch this video up here somewhere, and I'll be sure to see you there. But up to next time, yeah, the only limit is your imagination. Ciao.